I'm Derek. Welcome to Intertwined Hearts. Subscribe, like, and share if you enjoy. Let's go. The waiter guided Archer Reed through the maze of tables at Maison Azur, San Francisco's most exclusive restaurant. His hands, accustomed to manipulating millions in daily financial market transactions, nervously adjusted his Hermes tie. Kennedy Walsh, her companion, walked gracefully at her side, her red dress catching the attention of the other diners. "Mr. Reed, your table is ready," the maitre d' announced, leading them to a prime spot near the picture windows that offered a stunning view of the San Francisco Bay. Kennedy immediately whipped out her smartphone to capture the moment. After all, her 3 million followers expected constant updates on her glamorous life. "This place is amazing, Arch," Kennedy whispered, his green eyes sparkling as he scanned the Art Deco surroundings. "Getting a reservation here is practically impossible." Archer smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have my contacts," he replied, omitting that he had needed to use considerable influence to get a table at a restaurant with a 6-month waiting list. Maison Azur had become the epicenter of West Coast fine dining since opening 8 months ago. The sommelier approached with the wine list, but before he could make his presentation, Archer felt his body freeze. Through the glass doors that separated the living room from the kitchen, he saw her. Skylar Bennett. No, he mentally corrected himself. Skylar Reed. No, wrong again. She had returned to using her maiden name after the divorce. "Arch, is everything okay?" Kennedy touched his arm, noticing his sudden paleness. He didn't respond immediately, mesmerized by the sight of his ex-wife commanding the kitchen with the same precision with which he used to command his business meetings. Skylar moved between stations with studied grace, her white chef's jacket immaculate, her dark brown hair pulled into a perfect bun. "I didn't know she was the chef," he muttered, more to himself than to Kennedy. "She who?" Kennedy frowned, following his gaze. "Oh, you're talking about Chef Bennett? She's a legend. She got 3 Michelin stars in less than a year. I've been trying to score an interview with her for my channel for months." Archer felt a rush of irony when he realized that his current girlfriend was a fan of his ex-wife without even knowing the connection. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. 5 years ago, when they signed the divorce papers, Skylar had nothing but her culinary talent and a few dreams. The prenuptial agreement he had insisted on had ensured that she would leave the marriage with only what she had brought to him. The maitre d' returned with the menus, but before they could open them, he announced, "Chef Bennett has prepared a special tasting menu tonight. There will be 7 dishes that tell a unique story." Kennedy clapped his hands with excitement, already imagining the content for his social networks. Archer, however, felt his stomach tighten. He knew Skylar too well to believe in coincidences. The first dish arrived, a small portion of pumpkin and sage ravioli, exactly like the one she had prepared the first time they had dinner together in her small apartment during culinary school. The presentation was infinitely more sophisticated now, but the flavor was a time machine. "This sauce is divine," Kennedy commented, but Archer could barely hear her. Each bite brought back memories he had worked hard to bury. Skylar's laughter filling his kitchen, the way she bit her lip when she was focused on preparing something new, the nights she tested recipes until dawn. The second course was a remake of the grilled salmon with champagne sauce that she had served at the dinner where he proposed. The third, a carrot and ginger soup, the dish she always made when he was stressed about work. With each new dish, Archer felt deeper into his memories, while Kennedy happily documented each performance for her social media, completely oblivious to the unfolding drama. How had Skylar managed to turn her loss into a culinary empire? How had she overcome everything while he still carried the weight of his choices? Through the kitchen doors, their eyes met briefly. Skylar maintained her professional expression, but her amber eyes that he had come to know so well sent a clear message. She was no longer the dreamy young chef he had met and subsequently discarded. Dinner continued like a symphony of flavors and memories, each dish more revealing than the last. Kennedy continued his monologue about photo angles and hashtags while Archer delved deeper and deeper into his past, discovering that some wounds, even after 5 years, still bled when touched. And so, sitting in San Francisco's most exclusive restaurant, Archer Reed discovered that while building her financial empire, Skylar had turned her heartbreaks into culinary art, serving not just meals, but stories that needed to be told. The night was just beginning, and he knew that each subsequent course would reveal more truths that he might not have been prepared to face. The fourth dish arrived at the table with a presentation that had Kennedy immediately holding up her phone for more photos. It was a modern reimagining of a classic coq au vin, but Archer immediately recognized the original recipe. It was the dish Skylar had prepared the first time he took her to meet his parents. Chef Bennett has reinterpreted this traditional French dish using molecular techniques, explained the sommelier, serving a specially selected Pinot Noir. The chicken is prepared under vacuum for 48 hours, and the sauce is a red wine reduction with local wild mushrooms. Archer picked up his cutlery with slightly shaking hands. That dinner with his parents had been a disaster. Her mother, Victoria Reed, had made a point of highlighting Skylar's humble beginnings at every opportunity, while her father remained in stony silence throughout the meal. On the way home, Skylar cried silently in the passenger seat of her BMW. "Arch, you need to prove this," exclaimed Kennedy, completely oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions going through her companion. "It's simply divine. I already have more than 5,000 likes just on the photos of the previous dishes." He nodded mechanically, taking a piece into his mouth. The taste instantly transported him back to that night, but there was something different. Skylar's original dish was comforting, almost a plea for acceptance. This version was sophisticated, assertive, as if to say, "I no longer need your approval." Through the kitchen doors, Archer watched Skylar overseeing her team with military precision. She had changed. It wasn't just the more upright posture or the more determined look. There was an aura of confidence that he had never seen before. "Did you know," Kennedy continued her monologue, "that Chef Bennett has turned down 3 TV show offers in the last year? She says she prefers to focus on food and not fame. It's so authentic." Archer almost laughed at the irony. Skylar had always been authentic. It was he who had insisted that she change, that she adapt to his world of high luxury and appearances. Now she was here, at the top of the culinary world, being exactly who she always wanted to be. The fifth course arrived, an intermediate dessert of lemon sorbet with lavender. To cleanse the palate, the waiter announced. But Archer knew better. It was the dessert that Skylar prepared on Sunday afternoons, when they were still dating and dreaming about the future. "Mr. Reed?" A soft voice surprised him. It was the maitre d'. "Chef Bennett would like to know if you and your companion are enjoying the experience." Kennedy practically jumped out of his seat. "Oh my God, can we meet her? It would be amazing for my channel." "Unfortunately, the chef is very busy tonight," replied the maitre d' with a polite smile. "But she'll be happy to know they're enjoying it." Archer got the message between the lines. Skylar was in control now, orchestrating every moment of this night like a conductor leading his symphony. The tasting menu wasn't just a meal. It was a carefully constructed narrative of their relationship, served up in precise portions of remembrance and regret. The sixth course was the one that affected him the most. A variation of risotto with asparagus and black truffles. It was the last dinner Skylar had cooked for him, the night he announced he wanted a divorce. Back then, he was so consumed by his own ambition that he didn't realize the love put into each perfectly prepared grain of rice. "This risotto," Kennedy commented, filming the dish from every possible angle, "has an incredible texture. How does it manage to keep the grains so al dente?" The answer echoed in Archer's mind. Patience. Skylar always said that a good risotto required patience and dedication, qualities that he, ironically, didn't have with his marriage. As Kennedy continued his food documentation for social media, Archer allowed himself to delve deeper into his memories. He remembered Sunday mornings when he woke up to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes. "The nights when I arrived late from work and found a covered dish in the microwave, always with a sweet note. The seventh and final dish was about to be served, and Archer noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. Each dish had been a turning page in his story with Skylar, revealing truths he had chosen to ignore. What else did she have in store for the grand finale? Kennedy continued talking about engagement metrics and hashtags, but his words seemed distant, as if they came from another world. The world he had chosen after leaving Skylar. A world of appearances, numbers, and empty achievements. Through the kitchen doors, he saw Skylar personally supervising the preparation of the last dish. Their eyes met again, and this time he saw something beyond the professional mask. A flash of emotion he couldn't decipher. Was it sadness? Triumph? Or perhaps, just like tonight's menu, a complex mix of flavors he's never really made the effort to understand. The seventh and final dish of the night arrived at the table with a presentation that made Kennedy catch his breath. It was a seemingly simple dessert, an apple tart tatin, but with a modern twist that made it almost ethereal. The scent of caramel and vanilla hung in the air like a lingering memory. "My God, this is art," Kennedy exclaimed, positioning her phone to capture the perfect moment. "My followers are going to go crazy with this performance." Archer, however, felt his heart stop for a moment. The tarte tatin wasn't a random choice. It was the dessert Skylar had tried to make the night he came home with the divorce papers. On that occasion, she had burned the dessert for the first time in years, her hands shaking too much to control the caramel's consistency. "Chef Bennett reinterpreted this French classic," explained the waiter, serving an aged port wine to accompany. "The apples are confit for 72 hours in a secret blend of spices, and the dough is made using a Japanese technique that makes it extremely delicate." When Archer cut off a piece, he noticed something unusual. Underneath the caramel apple was a thin layer of something that looked like dark chocolate. The taste hit him like a punch in the gut. It was the same brand of chocolate he had brought back from his first business trip to Brussels at the beginning of his marriage. "There's something special about this chocolate," commented the sommelier, noticing her expression. "The chef insists on importing it personally from a small chocolate shop in Brussels." Kennedy continued to document every detail for her social media, but Archer could barely focus on her presence. His mind was stuck in a spiral of memories. Skylar anxiously waiting for him to taste the dishes she created especially for him, the nights they discussed their dreams of opening a restaurant together, the times he started canceling important dinners because something came up at work. Through the kitchen doors, he watched Skylar move gracefully between stations, overseeing every detail. She had changed her look. Her hair, previously always tied in a casual ponytail, was now elegantly done up, and her posture exuded a confidence he had never noticed before. "Mr. Reed," the maitre d' approached again. "Chef Bennett would like to know if she could have a moment with you in your office after dessert." Kennedy immediately perked up. "Oh, can I come along? It would be amazing to do an exclusive interview." "Pardon me, miss," the maitre d' replied diplomatically, but the chef requested only the presence of Mr. Reed, matters related to a previous private event. Archer felt his stomach drop. After tonight's entire gastronomic journey, after each dish filled with meaning and memory, Skylar wanted to talk to him. The dessert in front of him now seemed even more significant. It wasn't just the end of a tasting menu, it was the prelude to a confrontation he had been avoiding for 5 years. "Arch, are you okay?" Kennedy asked, finally noticing his paleness. "Do you know Chef Bennett from somewhere?" He swallowed hard, trying to formulate an answer that wouldn't reveal the whole truth. "Our paths crossed a few years ago," he said vaguely, knowing that he would soon need to be more honest with his current girlfriend. As I finished the dessert, each bite felt heavier than the last. The Brussels dark chocolate, which had once been a symbol of his love and consideration, now tasted of regret. Skylar had transformed every moment of her story into an extraordinary dining experience, proving that her art was capable of transcending heartbreak and transforming into something greater. Kennedy kept talking about viewership and engagement numbers, but his words seemed to come from another universe. Archer was caught between the past that each dish had resurrected and the uncertain future that awaited him in Skylar's office. What could she possibly want to say after serving a dinner that was practically an autobiography of their relationship? The maitre d' returned to guide him to the chef's office, and Archer stood up on shaky legs. "I'll be back soon," he said to Kennedy, who was already busy editing the night's photos for her next post. As he followed the maitre d' through the elegant halls of Maison Azur, Archer realized that Skylar hadn't just gotten over her divorce. She had turned her pain into art, her loss into triumph. Every dish tonight had been a page in her story rewritten on her own terms, and now she was about to write the final chapter herself. The office was at the end of a hallway lit by Art Deco chandeliers. A gold sign on the door simply said, "Chef Bennett." Archer took a deep breath, preparing himself to face not only his ex-wife, but also all the truths he had tried to ignore for the past 5 years. The door opened, and the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon enveloped him. The scent Skylar always wore in the kitchen, her trademark. It was time to face the last dish she had prepared for him, the truth served without accompaniments. Archer found Skylar standing by the window of his office, her back turned to him as she watched the lights of San Francisco. The ambiance reflected his current personality, elegant and minimalist, with just a few framed photographs of Maison Azur's iconic dishes on the walls. "You always loved seeing the city at night," he said, breaking the silence. Skylar slowly turned around. Up close, he could see the subtle changes in her face, some expression lines that hadn't been there before, a sharper, more calculated look. "And you always loved arriving unannounced," she replied, a half-smile playing on her lips. "Tonight's menu," Archer began, but Skylar held up a hand, cutting him off. "It wasn't a coincidence," she admitted, moving to sit behind her mahogany desk. "When I saw your reservation, I decided it was time to serve up some truths that have been held in for a long time." Archer remained standing, feeling strangely vulnerable. "Why now?" "Because I finally can," Skylar replied, her professional tone masking any underlying emotion. "You know, for years I thought I had lost everything in the divorce. The prenup you were so insistent on making guaranteed that. But I discovered that the only thing that really mattered, my talent, no one could take away from me." She opened a drawer and took out a yellowed envelope. "I found this when I was developing tonight's menu." He slid the envelope across the table towards her. With hesitant fingers, Archer opened the envelope. Inside was an old San Francisco Chronicle food review, dated 6 years ago. It was about a small bistro where Skylar had started her career as a sous chef. "You've never read this, have you?" she asked. "You were too busy building your empire to notice that I was building mine." Guilt hit Archer like a wave. He vaguely remembered Skylar mentioning something about an important criticism, but he had dismissed the topic, focusing on a corporate merger at the time. "Don't call me that," she cut in, her voice sharp as a chef's knife. "That Skylar is no more. The woman who stayed up waiting for you to come home from work, who altered your dreams to fit your plans. She's gone." Archer finally sat down, feeling the weight of each word. The last dish, the tarte tatin with Brussels chocolate. "Oh, did you notice?" Skylar smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "That chocolate meant so much to me. You came back from that trip so excited, saying that you had searched the whole city to find the best chocolate. That was the last time I saw you really work hard for something related to our wedding." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and accumulated regrets. Outside, the city lights twinkled like earthly stars, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the office. "Kennedy looks adorable," Skylar commented, surprising him with the change of subject. "Does she really appreciate good food, or just the likes she gets from her photos?" The question hit a raw nerve. Archer thought about all the times Kennedy had interrupted important moments to take a selfie or refresh her feed. "Why did you bring me here, Skylar?" She stood up, smoothing down her impeccable uniform. "Because I needed you to understand something. That prenup was the best thing that could have happened to me, It forced me to build something that is truly mine. Every dish I served tonight wasn't just a memory. It was a declaration of independence. Archer watched as she walked to a small bar in the corner of the office, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "This is the same wine we drank on our first date," she explained, offering him a glass. "Except now I can buy the whole winery if I want." The taste of the wine brought back memories of that night, Skylar in her small apartment, cooking with ingredients bought on sale, her eyes shining with passion as she talked about her culinary dreams. "You did it," he said softly. "Everything I ever wanted." "No," she corrected. "I got more than I wanted, because you taught me a valuable lesson about not depending on anyone else to make you happy." The phone on the desk vibrated, probably Kennedy wondering where it was. Skylar noticed his glance at the device. "You must come back," she said, placing her glass on the table. "Your girlfriend must be waiting. But before you go, I want you to know, I didn't invite you here to make you feel guilty. Every dish tonight was a page-turner. I'm moving on, Archer. And you should do the same." He stood up, feeling the weight of every word, every dish served, every memory revived. "Maison Azur is amazing, Skylar. You are amazing." "I know," she replied simply, turning back to the window. "And this time I didn't need anyone to tell me that." Archer walked to the door but stopped before leaving. "That review? What did it say?" Skylar didn't turn around. "They said I was a chef who transformed emotions into flavors. That each dish told a story. I think they were right? He left the office feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier. Kennedy was waiting for him in the lobby, his phone in hand, probably planning his next post. But for the first time, Archer wondered if he was repeating the same mistakes, just with a different protagonist. The aroma of the last dish still lingered in her memory. Sweet, bitter, and unforgettable, just like the taste of truth Skylar had served that night. Archer returned to the table where Kennedy was waiting for him, his mind still processing the conversation with Skylar. His girlfriend was engrossed in a video call, whispering excitedly about the stories she had posted during dinner. "And the last dish was simply divine. I can't wait to show you the full video of the experience." Kennedy ended the call as she saw him approach. "Arch, you won't believe it. I already have 3 gourmet brands wanting to partner after my posts tonight." He sat up, feeling the weight of meeting Skylar in every muscle in his body. Her office still loomed large in her mind, sleek and minimalist, so different from the cozy, chaotic kitchen she kept in her old home. "Kennedy," he began, his voice deeper than usual. "We need to talk." She lowered the phone, noticing for the first time the change in his expression. "Did something happen in Chef Bennett's office?" Archer took a deep breath, taking in the now almost empty restaurant. The last customers of the night paid their bills, while the team discreetly began preparing the salon for the next day. "Chef Bennett, Skylar, she's my ex-wife." Kennedy's smile froze on her perfectly made-up face. "Your ex-wife?" She blinked several times as if processing the information. "Why didn't you ever mention that?" "Because it was a part of my life I tried to forget," he answered honestly. "But tonight, every dish served was a page in our history." Kennedy pulled out his phone again, this time to search. His nimble fingers typed quickly and his eyes widened as he read the old headlines. "Wait, are you the ex-husband she mentions in the Food and Wine interview? What made her start over?" Archer felt his stomach drop. I didn't know about the interview, yet another thing I had missed while I was busy building my financial empire. "You know what's ironic?" Kennedy continued, now scrolling through more articles. "All these magazines talk about how losing everything in divorce was the catalyst for her success, how she turned adversity into motivation." The waiter approached discreetly with the bill, but Archer barely registered the astronomical cost of the dinner. His mind was stuck on Skylar's words. "That prenup was the best thing that could have happened to me." "Why did you bring me here tonight?" Kennedy asked, his voice losing its usual cheerful tone. "Was it some kind of test? Or did you really not know she was the chef?" "I didn't know," he replied, running a hand over his tired face. "But knowing Skylar as I do, she probably knew I was coming from the moment I made the reservation." Kennedy put the phone away, her green eyes studying him with an intensity he had never seen before. "Do you still love her?" The question caught him off guard. "It's not that simple." "It's actually quite simple," Kennedy interrupted. "You brought me to your ex-wife's restaurant, sampled a menu that was basically an album of memories of your relationship, and spent the last hour with an expression I've never seen before." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, San Francisco's characteristic fog began to envelop the buildings, softening the city's lights. "You know what else I discovered in my research?" Kennedy continued, his voice surprisingly calm. "Maison Azur opened exactly 5 years after your divorce. She turned the day she lost everything into the day she achieved her dream." Archer felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Of course, Skylar would choose that date. It was exactly the kind of symbolism she appreciated, like the hidden meanings in each dish she served tonight. "Kennedy, No," she interrupted him, standing up. "No need to explain. In fact, I think I understand completely now. You didn't get over the divorce. You just buried it under layers and layers of denial, just like she turned her pain into a culinary art." She picked up her bag, adjusting her red dress with dignity. "I'm going to order an Uber. I think you have a lot to process, and honestly, I don't want to be part of that emotional tasting menu." Before leaving, Kennedy turned around one last time. "Do you know the real irony? I always wanted to meet Chef Bennett because I admired how she turned emotions into flavors. Now I understand that you were her biggest inspiration, and her biggest regret." Archer was left alone at the table, surrounded by the echoes of a meal that had been much more than dinner. Through the kitchen doors, he saw Skylar conducting the final cleanup, her team moving in perfect sync under her command. The maitre d' approached one last time. "Anything else, Mr. Reed?" "No," he replied, handing over his credit card. "I think I've tasted enough for one night." As he signed the bill, Archer realized that Kennedy was right. Skylar hadn't just survived her divorce. She'd turned every painful moment into something extraordinary. Meanwhile, he had merely replaced one form of denial with another, like someone trying to mask a bitter taste with sugar. The last light in the kitchen went out, and he saw Skylar walk out the back of the restaurant, her silhouette disappearing into the San Francisco fog. The taste of the last dish still lingered in his mouth, sweet and bitter, like the truths he was finally beginning to swallow. Rain began to fall over San Francisco as Archer drove aimlessly through the city's steep streets. His Aston Martin, normally a source of pride, now seemed just an empty shell of status. Kennedy and Skylar's words echoed in his mind, mixing with the sound of drops against the windshield. Without thinking, he found himself parking in front of Pier 39. The place, usually packed with tourists, was practically deserted due to the storm that was forming. The lights of the Ferris wheel reflected in the water of the bay, creating a melancholic spectacle that matched his mood. His phone vibrated. It was a notification from Instagram. Kennedy had just posted a story on Maison Azur, but without tagging it. The caption simply said, "Sometimes the best stories are the ones we can't share. Chef Bennett, no ends of cycles." "Damn," he muttered, hanging up the phone and getting out of the car, letting the rain soak him. The cold air from the bay bit his face, but he barely felt it. His mind was filled with fragments of dinner, the ravioli that transported him to his first date, the salmon that made him relive his proposal, the tarte tatin that exposed his flaws. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Archer found himself entering a small seaside cafe that was still open. The place was simple, nothing compared to the refinement of Maison Azur, but it had its own charm. "Black coffee, please," he asked the elderly waitress, who looked at him with a mixture of concern and curiosity when she saw his drenched state. "You should add a slice of apple pie," she suggested. "Best remedy for rough nights." Archer almost laughed at the irony. More apple desserts. The universe seemed determined to remind him of his choices. While waiting for his order, he opened his laptop, which had miraculously survived the rain in his briefcase. A quick search led him to Skylar's food and wine interview that Kennedy had mentioned. "Losing everything was my greatest victory," he read on the screen. "When you have nothing but your talent and your determination, you find that they are the only things you really need." The photo that accompanied the article showed Skylar in her industrial kitchen, surrounded by her team. Her smile was genuine. Her eyes sparkled with a confidence he had never seen during their marriage. The waitress brought your coffee and pie, placing them gently on the table. "You know," she said, adjusting her apron, "sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves." Archer looked up, surprised by the casual wisdom. "It seems like everyone has a recipe for life except me." "Oh, honey," she smiled. "The recipe is the easy part. The hard part is having the courage to start from scratch when you burn your first dish." The words hit him hard. How many times had Skylar tried to say something similar? How many times had she suggested that they leave work early, that they take a vacation, that they build something together? His phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from his assistant reminding him of the important investor meeting the next morning. The same meeting he had used as an excuse to not attend Skylar's last birthday when they were still married. "There's always an important meeting," he murmured, remembering her words. The rain continued to fall outside, and through the cafe's foggy window, San Francisco looked like an impressionist painting, colors and lights blending together in a tableau of lost possibilities. Archer opened his email and started typing. "Cara Skylar, tonight's menu was a masterpiece, not just culinary but narrative. Each dish told a story that I tried to ignore for 5 years." He stopped, deleting everything. There was no email that could fix half a decade of negligence and self-deception. The waitress came back with more coffee. "Sometimes," she said, noting his conflict, "the best conversations start with a simple, 'I'm sorry.'" Archer watched his reflection in the coffee cup. The man staring back at him seemed older, more tired than he remembered. When did he become this person? When had I traded genuine happiness for success metrics? His phone rang once again. It was a notification from the financial news app. Maison Azur had just been named the best restaurant on the West Coast for the 4th month in a row. The photo showed Skylar accepting the award, her smile beaming as she held the trophy. "She did it," he whispered, a mix of pride and regret in his voice. The storm outside began to subside, but the turmoil inside only increased. Kennedy was right. He hadn't gotten over the divorce, just buried it under layers of denial and overwork. Looking at the untouched apple pie in front of him, Archer realized it was time to do something he should have done 5 years ago. Face the truth about his choices and their consequences. With hesitant fingers, he picked up the phone again, not to check emails or stock quotes, but to do something much more difficult: start recognizing your mistakes. The rain finally stopped, leaving San Francisco washed and renewed. Maybe, he thought, it was time to allow some truths to wash over him too. The morning after the revealing dinner at Maison Azur, Archer canceled all his meetings, something he hadn't done in years. Sitting in his office on the top floor of one of San Francisco's most prestigious skyscrapers, he watched the city awaken while rereading old text messages exchanged with Skylar. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Madison, his assistant for 8 years, carrying a folder with urgent documents. "Mr. Reed, Japanese investors are quite unhappy with the cancellation," she said, placing the folder on her desk. "And Miss Kennedy, called 3 times this morning." Archer continued looking out the window. "Madison, do you remember Skylar?" The assistant hesitated, surprised by the unexpected question. "Of course, Mr. Reed. Mrs. Bennett. She always brought special lunchboxes when she knew we would have to work late." "And I never properly thanked you for that, did I?" Archer turned to face her. "In fact, I've never properly thanked you for much of anything." Madison adjusted her glasses, uncomfortable with her boss's sudden vulnerability. "If I may, sir, Mrs. Bennett had a special gift. not just for cooking, but for making people feel cared for. Archer grabbed his phone, opening the news app. Maison Azur was in the spotlight again, this time announcing a benefit where Skylar would prepare an exclusive dinner to raise funds for a culinary education program in underserved communities. She always wanted to make a difference, he murmured, more to himself than to Madison. And I always said it was a naive dream. Mr. Reed, Madison hesitated before continuing. Perhaps you should see this. She slid a printed article across her desk. It was an old interview with Skylar, published a few months after the divorce. Cooking isn't just about feeding the body, he read aloud. It's about nourishing the soul. Every dish I prepare carries a story, a memory, a chance for healing. The phone on his desk rang. It was the chairman of the board, probably to question his cancellations. Archer ignored the call, something the old Archer would never do. Madison, I need you to do something for me, he said, standing up abruptly. Find every article, interview, and feature story about Skylar from the last 5 years. I want to know every story I missed while I was too busy counting money. Of course, sir, Madison replied, taking notes. Anything else? Archer grabbed his coat. Yes, call Maison Azur. Make a reservation for 1 person. Not the main hall. I want a table in the kitchen. Madison looked at him in surprise. In the kitchen, sir? It's time to see the other side of the story, he replied, adjusting his tie. The side I always avoided. While descending the panoramic elevator, Archer received a notification. Kennedy had just posted a video on her channel. The truth about my dinner at Maison Azur. His finger hovered over play, but he decided not to watch. Some truths needed to be discovered in person. In the building's lobby, he found a young chef delivering lunch to some executives. The familiar aroma of home cooking made him stop. It was the same smell that used to fill her apartment when Skylar was testing new recipes. Excuse me, he called the delivery man. Where does this food come from? From Chef Bennett's culinary training program, sir, the young man replied proudly. It gives people like me the opportunity to learn the craft. Archer felt his heart sink. Even after everything, Skylar was achieving her dreams, not just her professional ones, but also her desire to make a difference in people's lives. Her phone buzzed with a message from Madison. The table in the kitchen was confirmed for that night. Attached was the first batch of articles about Skylar that she had found. Sitting in his car, Archer began to read. Every word revealed a side of Skylar that he had never really known, or perhaps had never bothered to know. Between the lines of food reviews and professional profiles, he began to see a portrait of a woman who had turned her pain into purpose. Chef Bennett believes food is a form of communication, one of the articles said. Each dish tells a story, each flavor carries a message. Archer put the phone away, starting the car. I had a few hours until dinner and a lot to process. The streets of San Francisco passed by in a blur as he drove aimlessly, his mind filled with memories and regrets. That night, he wouldn't be just another customer at Maison Azur. Sitting at the kitchen table, he would witness the empire that Skylar built from the ashes of her failed marriage. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to start repairing what he had broken so long ago. The sun was beginning to set over the bay, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. In a few hours, he would be face to face, not just with Skylar, but with all the truths he had avoided for years. And this time, he was determined not to look away. Archer arrived at Maison Azur through the back entrance as per Madison's instructions. The contrast with his previous visit couldn't be greater. Instead of the elegant dining room, he was about to enter the beating heart of the restaurant, Skylar's kitchen. Mr. Reed, a young sous chef greeted him. I'm Charlotte, Chef Bennett's right-hand woman. Your table is ready. The table was actually a small counter with a privileged view of the entire kitchen operation. Unlike the previous night, when he had watched everything through the glass doors, now he was immersed in the complete spectacle. Chef Bennett will be here in a few minutes, Charlotte informed him, pouring him a glass of wine. She insisted on preparing her menu herself. Archer watched the team's synchronized ballet. Every movement was precise. Every communication was efficient. The kitchen operated like a Swiss clockwork. and at the center of it all was Skylar's station, impeccably organized, with knives perfectly aligned and ingredients meticulously arranged. "I didn't expect to see you so soon." The familiar voice surprised him. Skylar emerged from her private workshop, wearing her chef uniform like armor. "I didn't expect to come back either," he admitted. "But after yesterday, there was more to be said." Skylar began preparing something at her station, her movements fluid and precise. "Or perhaps more to be proved." "I read your articles today," he said, watching her cut vegetables with impressive dexterity. "About your culinary training program for underprivileged youth." "The naive dream has come true," she replied, without looking up from her work. "Funny how some people have to lose everything to discover they can achieve anything." The first starter arrived, a wild asparagus soup with black truffle. Unlike last night's dishes, which told their story, this one seemed to tell her story. "This was the first dish I created after the divorce," Skylar explained, finally facing him. "When I was living in that tiny apartment in Oakland, working at 3 different restaurants to support myself." Archer tasted the soup, feeling each layer of flavor develop in his mouth. She was complex, resilient, surprising, like Skylar herself. "Kennedy posted a video about yesterday," he commented, trying to keep the conversation going. "I saw it," Skylar replied, starting to prepare the next dish. She was surprisingly kind, considering the circumstances. She talked more about the food than the drama. The kitchen continued its frantic pace around them, but somehow it felt like they were in a private bubble of time and space. "Why did you let me come today?" he asked, watching her flaming something with hypnotic precision. "Because yesterday you tasted the past," she replied, carefully planning each move. "Today you will taste the present, who I became after our story ended." The second course arrived, a saffron risotto with caramelized scallops. "This," she explained, "was the dish that won me my first Michelin star. The night I received the news, I cried for hours. Not with joy, but because I finally understood that sometimes we need to lose something precious to find something extraordinary." Archer savored each bite, realizing that each dish wasn't just food, it was a confession, a declaration of independence, a proof of resilience. "You built something amazing here," he said, gesturing to the fully functioning kitchen. "I built something true," she corrected. "Something that is completely mine, without compromises, without concessions." The third course was served, a lamb with Moroccan spices and date puree. "This," Skylar said with a small smile, "was inspired by the first trip I took alone after my divorce. Morocco. You always said it was too dangerous for me." The night went on like this, each dish revealing a new side of Skylar that emerged from the ashes of her marriage. They were no longer shared memories, but milestones on their individual journey. "You know what's ironic?" she said, as she finished the dessert. "You always said I needed to be more ambitious, more focused on success. In the end, it was precisely when I stopped trying to be what you wanted that I found my true potential." The dessert was a work of modern art. Chocolate, coffee, and caramel deconstructed into gravity-defying shapes. "This one," she explained, "is new. It's not on the menu yet. I call it Fresh Start." Archer tasted it, involuntarily closing his eyes as he felt the flavors develop. It was simultaneously familiar and completely new, like the woman in front of him. "Skylar," he began, but she held up a hand, cutting him off. "I didn't come here to hear excuses or explanations," she said softly. "I came because I wanted you to see, really see, who I've become. Not to get revenge or make you feel bad, but because I'm finally proud enough of my story to share it." The night was coming to an end, and with it, a deeper understanding was established between them. It was no longer about what they had been, but about who they had become. "Thanks for dinner," he said, standing up. "You're welcome," she replied, turning her attention to the kitchen. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a restaurant to run." Archer walked out the back door, the taste of start over still on his lips, carrying with him not only the memories of an extraordinary dinner, but the understanding that sometimes losing someone is the only way to allow that person to find their true greatness. The day after eating dinner in Maison Azure's kitchen, Archer found himself unable to concentrate on work. The images of Skylar commanding her team with surgical precision and the flavors of each dish that told of her journey of overcoming remained vivid in her mind. "Mr. Reed?" Madison walked into his office carrying yet another stack of articles about Skylar. "I found something that perhaps you should see." It was a video interview for a documentary about revolutionary chefs. Skylar, wearing her impeccable uniform, spoke about her mentoring program for vulnerable young people. "When I lost everything," she said in the video, "I discovered I had two choices: sink or swim. I chose to swim, but I also decided to teach others to swim with me." Archer watched the screen, noting how she gestured confidently as she explained her program. It was a stark contrast to the woman who used to cringe during the corporate dinners he forced her to attend. "Madison," he called, pausing the video, "cancel my afternoon meetings. I have something important to do." Half an hour later, Archer parked his car in front of a modest building in the Mission District. It was one of Skylar's culinary training centers, where young people from underprivileged communities learned the basics of gastronomy. Through the large windows, I could see a class in progress. Charlotte, the sous chef who had welcomed him the night before, demonstrated cutting techniques to an attentive group of teenagers. "Can I help you?" asked a young woman at reception. "I actually don't really know why I'm here," Archer admitted, feeling out of place in his $3,000 Italian suit. "Well, you're in luck," the receptionist smiled. "Chef Bennett is teaching a special class today. Want to watch?" Before she could respond, the door to the training kitchen opened and Skylar emerged, chatting animatedly with a group of students. She stopped when she saw him, her expression changing subtly. "Archer," she said, professional as ever. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither do I," he answered honestly. "I saw the documentary about your program." Skylar dismissed the students with a few words of encouragement before turning to him. "This isn't exactly your natural environment." "No," he agreed, looking around at the simple but well-maintained equipment. "But maybe it's time to see different worlds." She studied him for a moment before gesturing toward the kitchen. "Want to see what it's like on the other side of the counter?" The next hour was a revelation for Archer. He watched Skylar teach basic cooking techniques to young people who had never properly held a chef's knife. His patience and dedication were evident in every instruction, every demonstration. "This is Miguel," she introduced a 17-year-old young man. "He started in the program 6 months ago and is already interning at Maison Azure." "Chef Bennett changed my life," Miguel said with evident pride. "I was going down the wrong path, but she showed me that I could do something meaningful with my hands besides messing around." Archer felt something tighten in his chest. Was this the dream he had ridiculed years ago? Skylar's idea of using gastronomy as a tool for social transformation? "Come on," Skylar called, leading him to a small back room. It was his office at the training center, very different from the elegant space at Maison Azure. Here were photos of program graduates, thank you cards, and a board full of lesson plans. "Why are you really here, Archer?" she asked, sitting behind her simple desk. "Because I'm finally seeing you," he replied after a moment of reflection. "Not the version I wanted you to be, but who you really are." Skylar let out a tired sigh. "You know what's ironic? During our marriage, you always talked about building a legacy, but you were so focused on numbers and profits that you didn't realize that true legacy is about impact, not money." A sound of laughter coming from the kitchen caught their attention. Through the office window, they could see the students practicing their techniques, proud of every little progress. "You've built something extraordinary here," Archer said, his voice filled with regret and admiration. "I built what I always wanted to build," she corrected, You just never stopped to really listen to my dreams." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths and belated realizations. Archer realized he was witnessing not only Skylar's professional success, but the physical manifestation of everything she ever wanted to be, a force for positive change in the world. "Yesterday's dinner," he began. Each dish told its journey of overcoming. "But this," he gestured to the training center, "this tells its essence." Skylar smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't seen in years. "Sometimes we need to lose everything to find our true purpose. You taught me that, even without meaning to." Her phone rang. It was time for her next class. Archer understood that it was time to leave, but something had fundamentally changed within him. It wasn't just regret for what could have been, but a deep understanding of what Skylar had become, not in spite of him, but because of his absence. "Keep making a difference," he said, walking toward the exit. "Always," she replied simply, already preparing to transform more lives through her art. 3 days after his visit to Skylar's training facility, Archer was in a board meeting when his phone vibrated. It was a notice from the San Francisco Chronicle. "Chef Bennett announces international expansion of Maison Azur. London will be first branch." "Mr. Reed," called one of the directors, "about the merger with the Japanese company." "Adiem," he said abruptly, standing up. "I need to check something important." Leaving his astonished colleagues behind, Archer drove to Maison Azur. The restaurant was closed for lunch, a rare event, and a small crowd of journalists gathered at the entrance. "Mr. Reed!" Charlotte recognized him, waving him toward the back entrance. "Chef Bennett is holding a press conference. You'll probably want to see that." In the main dining room, Skylar looked radiant in a professional white blazer, answering questions with the same precision she demonstrated in the kitchen. Archer positioned himself discreetly in the back, watching. "Chef Bennett, why London?" asked a reporter. "Because some stories deserve to be told in different languages," she replied with an enigmatic smile. "And gastronomy is a universal language." "What about the training program?" asked another journalist. "Will it be expanded too?" "Absolutely," Skylar stated with conviction. "Each Maison Azur will be accompanied by a training center. We're not just expanding a restaurant, we're expanding opportunities." Archer felt a familiar pang in his chest. It was the same feeling he had experienced when he saw her teaching at the training center, a mixture of pride and regret. After the press conference, as the journalists dispersed, Skylar noticed him. "Are you here to check out the competition?" she asked, approaching. "I came to congratulate," he replied. "London is a tough market." "Just like San Francisco was," she shrugged. "But I've learned that the greatest challenges bring the greatest rewards." They walked to the kitchen, where the team was already preparing for the evening service. The contrast between the professional Skylar at the press conference and the chef in her natural environment was subtle but notable. "You know," she began, checking some pots, "when you left me, I thought I had lost everything. But actually, that's when I started winning." "I noticed that," Archer admitted. "In the last few days, I've been thinking a lot about success and its true meaning." Skylar stopped what she was doing, staring at him. "And did you come to any conclusions?" "Yes," he replied, watching one of the training program's apprentices diligently preparing vegetables. "Success is not about how much you have, but about how much you can give." A small smile appeared on her lips. "It took you 5 years to realize that?" "Actually, it took 2 extraordinary dinners and a visit to your training center," he corrected. "And maybe a divorce." The ensuing silence was interrupted by Charlotte, bringing samples of dishes for Skylar's approval. As she tasted and made adjustments, Archer noticed how each team member watched her with genuine respect, not the kind of fear-based respect he used to command at his company. "Kennedy posted another video," Skylar commented casually, adjusting the seasoning of a sauce. "She has a talent for telling stories." "We're done," Archer revealed. "She deserves someone who sees her for who she is, not who she could be. I learned that the hard way." Skylar nodded, understanding the weight of that admission. Sometimes we need to lose something precious to appreciate what really matters. How did London come about? He asked, changing the subject. An investor tried my tasting menu last month, she explained. But unlike some, he understood that he wasn't just buying a restaurant. He was investing in a bigger vision. Archer watched as she coached a young chef on the correct flambé technique. His patience and dedication were evident in every gesture, every word of encouragement. "You've always been an excellent teacher," he commented. "I was just too busy trying to change you into someone else to notice." "And you've always been good at recognizing potential," she replied. "I only applied this talent to the wrong companies." The movement in the kitchen increased as dinner time approached. Skylar began preparing for duty, her focus subtly shifting. "I need to focus now," she said. "But Archer, thank you for finally seeing what was always here." He took the cue to leave, but before leaving, he stopped at the door. "Skylar, London will be lucky to have you." "London will be lucky to have more people discovering its potential," she corrected. "The restaurant is just the means to a greater end." Leaving Maison Azur, Archer felt different. The financial empire she built seemed smaller now, less significant when compared to the real impact Skylar was having on people's lives. In his car, before starting it, he opened his laptop and began researching foundations that support educational programs. Maybe it was time to redefine your own concept of success. 2 weeks after announcing Maison Azur's expansion to London, Archer found himself in an unusual situation. Sitting in a boardroom with the board of his newly created foundation, the Reed Foundation for Culinary Education. "So, Mr. Reed," began Diana Chen, an educational program specialist he had hired, "do you want to establish culinary training centers in underserved areas of San Francisco?" "Not exactly," Archer replied, adjusting his tie. "I want to create a support network for existing programs. There are people doing incredible work out there. Our role is to strengthen these initiatives." The comment generated surprised looks around the table. The Archer Reed they knew, famous for his hostile takeovers and aggressive mergers, talking about strengthening existing initiatives rather than creating his own empire. Speaking of existing programs, Diana continued consulting her notes. "Chef Bennett—" "No," Archer interrupted firmly. "We will not interfere with her work. Her program is the model we should study, not compete with or absorb." After the meeting, Archer walked to his redesigned office. The walls that were previously decorated with market graphics now displayed photographs from various social gastronomy programs around the country. Madison walked in, carrying her tablet. "Mr. Reed, Kennedy Walsh has posted a new video," she informed hesitantly. "It's about personal transformation and, well, you should watch it." In the video, Kennedy spoke with surprising honesty about relationships, authenticity, and the importance of recognizing people's true worth. Without mentioning names, she described how a dinner at Maison Azur had changed her perspective on success and genuine connections. "She understands," Archer murmured, a small smile on his lips. "Sir?" Madison called. "There's one more thing. Food and Wine magazine wants to do a story about your new foundation." "Decline," he replied immediately. "This isn't about publicity or recognition." That afternoon, Archer visited 3 community cooking programs in different San Francisco neighborhoods. In each one, I saw reflections of Skylar's work, not in specific techniques or methodologies, but in the fundamental principle of using gastronomy as a tool for transformation. In one of them, he met Maria, a 65-year-old woman who taught traditional Mexican recipes to young people in the neighborhood. "Food is memory," she said, as she demonstrated the correct technique for making tortillas. "When we teach someone to cook, we are passing on more than recipes. We are passing on history, culture, love." The words echoed in Archer's mind, reminding him of the dinners Skylar cooked in the early years of their marriage. Each dish had a story, a meaning beyond the ingredients. How had he been so blind? His phone vibrated. It was a notification about Maison Azur. Skylar had just announced a partnership with a culinary school in London to offer full scholarships to students from underserved communities. "Mr. Reed?" called Maria, noticing his distraction. "Want to learn how to make tortillas?" For a moment, Archer hesitated. His $3,000 Italian suit didn't exactly match the flour and pasta, but then he remembered how Skylar always said that the best lessons in the kitchen came from getting your hands dirty. "Of course," he replied, removing his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. An hour later, with flour on his face and an uneven pile of tortillas in front of him, Archer understood something fundamental. The true value was not in the end result, but in the learning process, in the connections formed, in the barriers broken. Back in his office, he found an envelope on his desk. Inside was an invitation to the opening of Maison Azur in London, scheduled for 2 months from now. Attached is a handwritten note. "I heard about your foundation. You're not trying to compete with me, are you? Just kidding. It's good to see that some important lessons don't need to be served on gourmet plates. S." Archer smiled, putting the invitation away carefully. His transformation in the last few weeks had surprised everyone, including himself. The ruthless financial mogul now spent his afternoons learning to make tortillas and planning how to support community food programs. Madison came in with more documents to sign, donation agreements for various culinary programs in the city. "Mr. Reed, the press is speculating about your change of business focus. They want to know if you are having a midlife crisis." "No, Madison," he replied, signing the documents. "For the first time in my life, I'm having clarity." The sun was beginning to set over San Francisco, painting the sky with shades of orange that resembled the perfectly golden caramel Skylar got in her desserts. Archer realized that, just like in cooking, sometimes the simplest ingredients, combined with care and purpose, could create something extraordinary. And maybe, just maybe, he had finally found the right recipe to make a difference. The invitation to the opening of Maison Azur in London remained on Archer's desk as a constant reminder of the changes in his life. While reviewing the latest reports from the Reed Foundation, his phone rang. It was Diana Chen. "Mr. Reed, we were able to partner with 5 community culinary programs," she reported, excitement evident in her voice. "And there's something else you should know. Chef Bennett has been in touch." Archer felt his heart skip a beat. "What did she say?" "She wants to invite us to a meeting. Apparently, she's interested in creating a collaborative network between her program and the projects we're supporting." The news took Archer by surprise. Over the past few weeks, he had carefully avoided any appearance of competing with or interfering with Skylar's work. Now she was reaching out. "Schedule the meeting," he replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. The next day, Archer found himself at Skylar's training center again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The makeshift meeting room was full of representatives from the city's various culinary programs, and Skylar presided over the table with the same authority she demonstrated in her kitchen. "The idea is simple," she explained, handing out folders with her plan. "We can be more effective if we work together. Each program has its unique strengths, and together we can create a support network that benefits more people." Archer watched as she presented her vision. She was ambitious but practical, just like the Skylar he was beginning to really know. The plan involved sharing resources, cross-mentoring, and a progression system that would allow students to experience different types of cuisine. "The Reed Foundation," Skylar continued, her eyes meeting Archer's briefly, "could be the catalyst we need, not to control or direct, but to facilitate and support." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with lively discussions and collaborative planning. Archer remained mostly silent, absorbing the dynamics and noticing how Skylar skillfully guided the group toward consensus. After the meeting, as the other participants left, Skylar asked him to stay. "We can talk?" They walked to the training kitchen, now quiet after the day's classes. Skylar began brewing coffee, her movements precise and familiar. "Why now?" Archer asked, breaking the silence. "Because you finally understand," she replied, pouring 2 cups. "It's not about building empires or proving points. It's about creating something bigger than ourselves. The aroma of coffee filled the room, bringing back memories of mornings shared long ago. But now it was different. They were different. "Are you really going to London?" he asked, accepting the cup she offered. "For 6 months to establish everything," Skylar confirmed. "Afterwards, I will return to oversee both operations. But before I go, I want to make sure our network of programs here is strong and functioning." Archer took a sip of his coffee. It was perfect, as always. "You turned your passion into purpose," he noted. "It took me 5 years to understand that. Sometimes we need to lose something valuable to understand its true value," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're doing a good job with the foundation, Archer. It's genuine." "I learned from the best," he said, eliciting a soft chuckle from Skylar. "You know what's funny?" she continued, leaning on the kitchen counter. "During our marriage, you always talked about leaving a legacy. Now we're both building one, just in ways we never imagined." The afternoon sun streamed in through the kitchen windows, creating golden patterns on the tile floor. Somewhere nearby, they could hear the sound of dishes being washed and distant conversations. "Are you going to the opening in London?" she asked, although she already knew the answer from the invitation on her table. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Archer replied. "Besides, I want to see how you will adapt Californian cuisine to the British palate." I have a few tricks up my sleeve," she smiled. "And a new tasting menu that tells a different story. Not about the past, but about the future." They continued talking about plans and possibilities, the tension of the last few meetings replaced by something lighter, more mature. It wasn't romance, nor exactly friendship, but a mutual understanding born of shared history and newfound respect. "I need to go," Skylar said eventually, noticing the time. "I have a class for teenagers in 20 minutes. We're teaching French desserts today." "Sure," Archer replied, standing up. "Thanks for the coffee. And for the partnership." At the door, Skylar stopped. "Archer, I'm proud of what you're doing. Really." He nodded, understanding the weight of those words. As he walked back to his car, Archer realized that some recipes take time to reach perfection, whether in the kitchen or in life. Heathrow Airport was busy when Archer arrived in London, a week before Maison Azure opened. The gray, rainy city seemed oddly appropriate for his mood, reflective but hopeful. Mr. Reed, a young chef wearing the Maison Azure uniform, was waiting for him in the arrivals area. "I'm Sophie, Chef Bennett's assistant in London. She asked me to accompany you to the restaurant." While driving through historic central London, Archer looked out the car window at the ancient streets, thinking about how Skylar had transformed not only her own life, but was now about to impact a new city. Maison Azure London was housed in a restored Victorian building in Mayfair. Even though it was still preparing for its opening, the place already exuded the same sophisticated elegance as its headquarters in San Francisco, but with a distinctly British touch. "Archer," Skylar's familiar voice surprised him. She emerged from the kitchen wearing her crisp uniform, looking perfectly at home in her new surroundings. "Arrived early. I wanted to see behind the scenes," he replied, observing the team in training. "Additionally, the Reed Foundation is finalizing a partnership with a local culinary program in the East End." Skylar smiled, a genuine smile that still took him by surprise. "Come, I want to show you something." She led him through the busy kitchen, where British and American chefs worked side by side, to a separate area upstairs. It was a training space, similar to the one in San Francisco, but with a stunning view of the London skyline. "This will be our first international training center," she explained, as young apprentices practiced basic techniques. "We already have 20 students from different social backgrounds, all with incredible stories." "How has it been adapting?" asked Archer, noting how naturally she interacted with the local team. "Different," Skylar admitted. "The British have their own way of doing things. But that's exactly what makes it more interesting, learning to adapt without losing the essence." A young chef approached with a sample of sauce for Skylar to taste. She tasted it, made some suggestions in precise English, and the young man returned to his station with a determined smile. Remember when you said I was wasting time teaching people with no experience? She asked, leading him to her temporary office. I remember a lot of things I said that I regret, he answered honestly. The office was smaller than the one in San Francisco, but it already had Skylar's personal touch, photos of her students, cookbooks in several languages, and a small collection of local spices she was studying. The inauguration will be different, she said, sitting down. Not just a new restaurant, but a statement of purpose. Each dish will tell a story of transformation. Like the menu you served me that night? No, she smiled. That menu was about the past. This one will be about the future, about all the lives we can touch through food. Archer watched through the window as the apprentices practiced. You have truly found your calling. Just like you found yours, she replied. I saw the initial report from the Reed Foundation. The impact you are having in San Francisco is impressive. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the busy kitchen. It was different from the tension that used to exist, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Diana mentioned that you guys are expanding the scholarship program, Skylar commented. Yes, we want to reach more cities, he confirmed. Actually, I was thinking about talking to you about a possible broader partnership between the foundation and its training centers. Skylar studied him for a moment. You've really changed, haven't you? I learned from my mistakes, he replied simply, and with you. A young chef knocked on the door, saying they needed Skylar in the kitchen to make an important decision about the opening menu. Come to dinner today, she invited, standing up. We're doing a final test of the menu. It will be unlike anything you've ever tasted. Better than the last one? He asked, a half smile on his lips. Not better, she corrected. Just different. That menu was about our history. This one is about all the stories that are yet to come. As he watched her return to the kitchen, commanding her team with grace and authority, Archer realized that some transformations happen not when we lose something, but when we finally understand what really matters. London was preparing to welcome another star into its gastronomic constellation. But for Archer and Skylar, it was more than that. It was proof that sometimes we need to completely lose ourselves to find our true path back home. The opening night of Maison Azure London arrived with a fine drizzle typical of the city. The Victorian building glowed under carefully planned lighting, and a line of luxury cars stretched down the cobblestone street. Archer adjusted his tie as he watched the VIP guests move through the antique windows. Food critics, celebrities, and leading figures from the culinary world converged to witness the international expansion of Skylar's empire. Mr. Reed, Sophie, Skylar's assistant, approached. Chef Bennett asked me to accompany you to a special place. Instead of heading to the main hall, Sophie led him down a side staircase to a small room with a privileged view of the kitchen. It was an intimate space, with just one table set for 2 people. Here you can see the entire process, Sophie explained. The chef has prepared a special menu for this table. Before Archer could respond, Skylar emerged from the kitchen in motion, her uniform immaculate as always. I thought you might like to see the whole show, she said with a small smile. And who will be my companion? He asked, noticing the second place placed. Diana Chen, Skylar replied. I thought it appropriate for the director of the Reed Foundation to witness the beginning of this new phase. She will arrive in a few minutes. The kitchen below them was a moving symphony. Chefs of different nationalities worked in harmony, each contributing their expertise to create something unique. Among them, Archer recognized some graduates of the San Francisco training program. That's Miguel, Skylar pointed out, noticing his gaze. He came as part of the exchange program. He's doing extraordinarily well. Diana arrived, elegant in a navy blue dress, carrying a folder of documents. Sorry for the delay. I was finalizing the details of the new partnership with the East End program. The first dish arrived, a sophisticated reinterpretation of fish and chips, transforming the British classic into a gastronomic work of art. This dish represents the fusion of cultures, explained Skylar. How different people can come together to create something extraordinary. While enjoying the appetizer, Diana shared the foundation's latest news. Similar programs were popping up in other cities, inspired by Skylar's model. The support network was expanding organically, touching more and more lives. "It's amazing how everything connected," Diana commented. "What started as isolated programs is now a movement." The second course was a pea soup with mint, served with wasabi foam, another fusion of British tradition and modern techniques. Archer noticed how each element told a story of transformation and adaptation. "Did you see that young chef at the dessert station?" Skylar asked, discreetly pointing. "She was living on the street 6 months ago. Now she's one of our most promising pastry chefs." The night went on like this, each dish a declaration of possibilities and second chances. Through the observation window, they could see the perfect dynamics of the kitchen, where traditional hierarchies gave way to a system of mentoring and mutual support. "Skylar," called Diana as the main course was served, a lamb with Moroccan spices and elements of Indian cuisine. "The foundation would like to propose something different. Not just financial support, but a global strategic partnership." Skylar stopped supervising the kitchen for a moment, turning her full attention to the conversation. "Continue." "We want to create an international certification program," Diana explained, removing some documents from her folder. "Something that combines culinary excellence with social responsibility. Maison Azur would be the center of excellence, and the Reed Foundation would provide the support structure." Archer watched Skylar's reaction. 5 years ago, she would have seen this as an attempt at control. Now, his eyes sparkled with possibilities. "We could impact thousands of lives," she mused, her fingers drumming gently on the table. "Not just teaching culinary techniques, but offering a real path forward." Dessert arrived, a spectacular creation that mixed traditional British pudding with elements of fusion cuisine. "This," explained Skylar, "represents our vision for the future, respecting tradition, embracing innovation, and creating opportunities for all." Downstairs, the main hall was packed with important guests, but in that small room, 3 people were quietly redefining the future of social gastronomy. "So," said Diana, "it's a partnership?" Skylar looked at Archer, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded softly, not as an ex-husband, not as a businessman, but as someone who finally understood the real value of things. "It's a partnership," Skylar confirmed, extending her hand to seal the deal. "But on one condition, we will stay focused on people, not numbers." "Always," Diana promised, squeezing his hand. The last dish of the night was served, a small chocolate work of art that dissolved upon contact with a hot sauce, revealing a core of fresh fruit. "To remember," Skylar said, "that sometimes we need to let our defenses dissolve to discover our true essence." Archer tasted the dessert, letting the chocolate melt on his tongue. It was simultaneously familiar and innovative, like everything Skylar created. Through the observation window, he could see his team working in perfect sync, each person contributing to something bigger than themselves. "You did it, Skylar," he said softly. "Not just success, but meaning." She smiled, that genuine smile he had come to value. "We did it, Archer, each in our own way." The night was coming to an end, but it was just the beginning of something bigger. As the last guests left and the team began cleaning, Archer, Skylar, and Diana remained in the small room, finalizing the details of a partnership that promised to transform lives through the art of gastronomy. Outside, London continued its eternal dance of light and shadow. But inside Maison Azur, a new recipe for change was being written. One that combined the precise ingredients of vision, compassion, and second chances.